Welcome to the Rural Blueprint. I'm Hannah. This is a podcast about the innovative spirit showing up in rural communities across the Pacific Northwest and beyond. The small business owners, community partners, and organizers who are strengthening their towns. Each episode, we go deep on their journeys, the strategies that are actually working, and what we can all learn from the people who've decided to invest in rural places. If you care about where those communities are headed, you're in the right place. Let's get to it. I'm so excited for the guest that I'm chatting with today to get to talk to you. This is Madeline. Madeline grew up on the Long Beach Peninsula in Washington. Madeline moved back after college in 2011 to open a small bakery, which she ran for 7 years. In 2016, she co-founded the National Organization to Uplift Rural Millennials, which is how she first connected with the Center for Rural Strategies. She served on various boards and is an elected public hospital commissioner, has been a director of Rural Assembly for just over a year. So Rural Assembly, just a little bit of background, is a part of the Center for Rural Strategies. So it's within that organization. It was founded 25 years ago in rural Appalachia. The organization also runs the Daily Yonder, which is a national rural news platform. You grew up, left, and came back to start a bakery. That decision to return and build something in your hometown seems like it shaped everything that came after. What did that experience teach you that you carry into the work that you do now? How did that shape what you're doing today?
Yeah, so when I moved back to start the bakery, I think a few things surprised me. One was that being a small business owner, and I think particularly a bakery owner where you're doing something that brings people joy, really cemented a very particular place for me within my community. So I had grown up there, people knew me very well, and were very supportive. But doing something like that brought a service to people cemented my place within the community as an important individual, and that somebody that people could look up to and that they were excited to support, both like as a small business owner and then eventually in other ways. It really gave me a deep connection to my community. I mean, I saw people every single week at the farmers markets. I was dropping off special orders to coffee shops and talking with people and getting to know people. And it just really created a little niche for me that I didn't necessarily have when I graduated from high school and then before I had moved back. It also allowed me to kind of become an adult in the rural community that had raised me, which I think people who have done that know what I mean. It is an interesting process to be in a place where people know everything about you, know your background, know your family. Small business owners have a very unique role in the community, especially rural places. So that was just a really smart move, honestly, and something that I didn't fully intend when I started the bakery. Mostly it was something that I wanted to do as a passion project. So yeah, I think it really was a turning point. It then taught me the majesty of rural communities and how important they are and how wonderful they can be, and why I really wanted to dedicate my future work to rural places. I started to realize as I owned the bakery that my identity was really wrapped up with the place that I had grown up and then now live. And that meant a lot to me. And when I had the bakery, that was kind of the first entry point to that. And then running for local office for the hospital board then was the kind of the next point for me of realizing, okay, I can take this next step of leadership within this community and what that looks like. And then forming Rethinking Rural, which was the national network of rural millennials, really was me figuring out how to connect with other people who had that rural identity. I knew that there must be other people out there that were like me, that were in their mid-20s, who are really looking to get more involved in community in their small places, and that they probably had some great ideas that I wanted to learn from. So that's kind of where it all came from.
I love that. I think a bakery is something that would just be a place of joy. I feel like that would be where I would want to be. If I was in a small town, if I was working for the day or like studying or just hanging out, I would want to be in a bakery like that. Do you miss running a bakery?
You know, honestly, I don't miss it a ton. I do miss certain pieces of it, and I miss the connection point with people in that way of like delivering joy and exciting things to people. Like you really start to become a part of those important milestones in people's lives. I mean, I would do people's anniversary cakes and their wedding cake. And then when they had a baby shower, I would do their baby shower cake. And then their baby would turn 1 and I would get to do their baby's first birthday cake. And you become a part of those people's memories, which again, really does put you in a unique place within your community that I think is really fun and special.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So the rural strategy has been around 2007. I think that's the time period when it started. And then what are you trying to do with it now? Where are you trying to direct it to go in the future?
Yeah, so the history of rural assembly, it started as a policy roundtable, was kind of its format, and it was part of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and then eventually it became part of Center for Rural Strategies, and it's morphed a lot over the years. Historically, it acted as a gathering organization, and it would host these large in-person rural assemblies in different parts of the country. And obviously, the pandemic changed our ability to do that pretty drastically. And so I think the role of the rural assembly has particularly shifted over the last 6 years and has tried to figure out a way to continue to meet that need of needing to convene rural people and provide capacity support and connection, while also being forced to do a lot of that digitally in a new way. And so we at Rural Assembly now, we do a lot of our gatherings digitally. We have started to kind of, since I've been in the role for since March 2025, we've been trying to figure out how to get back to place a bit. I think we've found a lot of successes in digital mediums. We do a program every week for rural women called Morning Connections. That's just kind of a digital meeting place where people can come and spend half an hour with each other to talk about what's going on in their communities. We do it everywhere, which we'll talk more about later, but that's a digital broadcast that happens once a year. But we're trying to figure out how to get back into place. And so that's really what my goal has been, is figuring out how we blend this digital era that we find ourselves in that is so beneficial to rural people in so many ways, and our ability to connect with other rural people across the country and learn from each other and share and collaborate is so much easier in so many ways. However, so many people are feeling isolated and like they need to feel more supported within their own place. So that has been my goal, is trying to figure out the kind of sweet spot and where rural assembly fits in to that narrative on a national scale. That's kind of what I've been grappling with over the last year plus.
That's so well said. If I'm meeting with someone face to face, it is a completely different experience. But yeah, you mentioned the central question that you're wrestling with internally right now is how to build capacity for rural people who already know what needs to be done but can't get from A to Z. And this is a fascinating conversation that I love. But what does that look like in practice in your work? How are some ways that you're trying to solve that problem in what you do?
Yeah, so we sit in kind of an interesting spot because we are a national organization, and rural America is so incredibly diverse, and every rural community has its own needs and its own set of barriers and assets and all of those things. So it can be really difficult to figure out how to best serve such a uniquely diverse set of communities. And yet at the same time, so many rural places and people are dealing with very similar things in their place and have similar concerns and are seeking similar tools. So there is a role for an organization like Rural Assembly to play. One of the things that I've really tried to embrace is this notion that actually Ash Hansen of Department of Public Transformation says so often, that to really understand a rural community, you have to go smell it. Like, you have to be there, and you have to smell, like, come smell my place is what she says very often.
I love that.
I love that. I think that's so true. And so for me, part of my role is really going to smell places, like going to be in community and really learn from people what they need, and then figure out best how to play this kind of matchmaker role of how can we support you to connect you not only with other communities, but what are your concerns? At Rural Assembly, call ourselves generalists. We are knowers of many things and not necessarily experts in anything. and which is also an interesting place to be. But we know people who know stuff, is basically what I tell people. And we are really good at connecting rural people and rural places to people who know stuff and who can help them get things done. And maybe that's a specific organization, maybe that's a philanthropy, maybe that's another rural community who has done something similar to what they're trying to do. Or maybe we create a program that works for them and what they need. We really try to listen is really what we do on a regular basis and figure out how we can fit into the gaps. And it really all comes from like listening and relationship building with rural people.
That's beautifully put. We talked about the Rural Assembly Everywhere is coming up on July 23rd, so this summer. And this year you're doing something new with local watch parties across 30 communities. So if someone is in rural Oregon or Washington or Northern California who has never heard of Rural Assembly Everywhere event, why should they show up and join for that event? Why would it benefit them?
Yeah. So Everywhere is kind of our answer to the pandemic and being unable to hold our traditional large multi-hundred person gatherings. But we still wanted to figure out a way to bring people together. And so Everywhere is a number of things. It's a celebration of rural America, both culture and arts. It's also a place where we feature conversations around certain topics and issues that rural communities are dealing with. So the subject matter varies greatly every single year. And it's now a 90-minute live broadcast, and it'll happen July 23rd. You can find information at ruralassembly.org. And last year, kind of getting back to what I was saying about trying to figure out where we fit in this idea of kind of getting back into place, we started a hybrid version where we did our digital broadcast, but we also partnered with 9 rural communities across the country to host in-person watch parties in tandem with the broadcast. And we provided some financial support for them and also some planning capacity support for them, but really said, take this and do what you will. Bring the people together that you want to bring together and have the conversations that you want to have with this kind of national context and topics that we're giving you and that we're using in our broadcast, but use them in ways that make sense for your community. It was very successful. And so this year we are hosting around 35 of these watch parties all across the country in, I think, over 25 states. And we're just really excited for what our local site partners are planning for each of their gatherings. They're all different. Some will be very small, some will be a little larger, and they're all based around what the needs of those communities and those leaders are. And then they're using Everywhere kind of as a jumping off point for their conversations. So in terms of your question about what will people get out of it, I think the reason I really love Everywhere is as a rural person or as even a rural curious person who wants to learn more about rural America, it's a very kind of uplifting and educational 90 minutes. You'll get some wonderful poetry from rural poets. You'll get rural music. You will hear from authors around rural issues. This year we're featuring Mary Annette Pember in conversation with Shirley Sneevy. They're both with ICT Indian Country Today. Mary Annette Pember wrote a book called Medicine River, and it is about the generational trauma and legacy of Indian boarding schools in the United States. So obviously a very important topic. And we will also have a conversation about philanthropy in rural America. And actually that will feature Ash, who I mentioned from Department of Public Transformation, and then also Erin Borla, who is the executive director of the Roundhouse Foundation, which is a philanthropy based that does a lot of fantastic rural work particularly in Oregon. So you'll hear from not only national voices, but also regional voices that are probably very helpful for Pacific Northwest listeners. And it's a moment to just gather together across geography. So you'll hear from communities all over the country. There's a very active chat that generally occurs around people saying what they love about their rural place and sharing resources and all of those things. So it's just a pretty special 90-minute gathering that I think is fairly unique in its subject and its style.
I love that. The last question I had was about, you described the site partner model as giving communities national content and structure and then saying, take this and make it hyper local. Can you explain more about how national organizations should relate to local communities?
Yeah, I think a lot of where I'm coming from with Rural Assembly stems from the fact that before I worked at Rural Assembly, I was the the executive director of a very small heritage museum in Ilwaco, again, just in my hometown. And I did that for 5 years, and it was a very small nonprofit, very small, all part-time staff. And I really learned what it meant to run a small rural nonprofit and the struggles that people have on a daily basis, and the million hats that you wear, including having to fix the toilets and make sure that all the events are running smoothly and that everything's funded and the doors are open. And that perspective has really guided my work at Rural Assembly, in that I understand the limited capacity that so many of our rural leaders, particularly those that are either running rural nonprofits or doing rural community organizing, they are stretched to the maximum, and their ability to do much more is limited. And I think so often large organizations are kind of always asking for more, or figuring out, or saying like, here, we can provide this, but you have to do this. And there is this kind of long generational instance of extraction within rural America on a number of fronts, particularly environmental, but I also think in terms of capacity of rural leaders. And so with my work at Rural Assembly, I'm really trying to find ways that we can help and be advocates and partners with rural practitioners and rural leaders in ways that don't stretch them even further, and basically find ways for them to participate in these national conversations without adding to their burden. And so I think these site partner models are our kind of first attempt at that and figuring out how to do it well. This is our second year. All of our site partners receive a small stipend, and they have opportunities to connect with us and get some capacity building help from us in terms of their plan for their event. They also get time to network with all of the other site partners that are participating. So it's an ability to connect more deeply with rural practitioners across the country. And so I think that we are trying to figure out how to put that idealism into practice. And I don't think that we have completely solved the problem yet, or won the game, but I think we are trying to figure out how we act as a national connector in a way that adds capacity to rural people rather than takes it away. I would never want something that we did only to kind of forward our goals as an organization without leaving a long-lasting relationship within a place that we worked. And so trying to figure out how to do that as well is really, really important to me. And yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be my life's work is figuring out how to do that well, learning from mistakes and growing.
That's amazing. I think that you and your team are killing it for sure. I'm very impressed by that. A lot of the people that I've talked to are community leaders. Either they have their own business and that is their primary source of income, and the work they do, they're not being compensated for. Or it's not directly compensating them, but they know it helps everybody in their community, including them. Where can we find more about your work? What website should we visit if we want to find out about the work that you do?
Yeah, ruralassembly.org is the best place. That you will find everything about everywhere and Rural Assembly, and then you can also find pathways and links to like Daily Yonder and other places. We also are on all the normal social channels as well, so people can find us there.
I love that. Super simple. Yeah, there's a gold mine of information on there. I mean, I could spend a whole 48 hours on your website. Thank you for your wisdom and just sharing this with us. I'm so inspired by all the work that you do. Your time is so valuable. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This was super fun.
Thanks for listening to The Rural Blueprint. If this conversation was useful, share it with someone who needs it. You can find resources for rural entrepreneurs and their communities, including funding opportunities and business development programs, and more at reinventingrural.com. We'll see you next time.